I started praying to shrines because I thought that was the right thing to do, reclaiming my roots, dressing in African apparel as we're supposed to do, bowing to African gods, believing in African gods. And now all of it is temporary. All of it is a scam. I was living with devils.
First, I want to send a big shout out to my sister here and her partner, the DIY House and Farm. This is a deeply personal journey, and to have it out there, to share this online, is bound to help many brothers and sisters who are trying to relocate to Africa, who may have certain misconceptions about Africa. And knowledge is power. So having this in mind should help you really figure out the many aspects of Africa that you need to figure out before you come. Nonetheless, majority of what you will have to figure out will have to be on the continent of Africa itself. When the rubber meets the road, that's when you really get to know what is really at stake. That said, this is AOB, Africa, our business. Africa is our business, whether you're in diaspora, whether you are on the continent of Africa. So if you're here for the first time, kindly subscribe and ring that bell. You don't want to miss our upcoming stories. This particular one is dear to me because this sister goes out all the way to speak candidly about her own experience, an experience that Africans on the continent have gone through, but one that also the diaspora is trying to figure out as they travel to the continent, trying to figure out how to connect with Mother Africa, the spiritual world, the deities of Africa, talking about fertility, talking about harvest, whatever it is that they talk about. It is important to know whether these things actually have a place in our lives today or not. Do they? I don't know, but the sister speaks here so powerfully. Let's listen to her message. Take something away from it. Put something back. Share what you can share in the comments below. And let's build her, build ourselves in the process. This has got to be given the value that it truly deserves. Check this out.
I wanted to come to Ghana to do business, and I wanted to travel all of the African countries in peace and quietness, just like the rest of them. Yeah. Did it happen? Some of it. I started eating all kinds of foods and drinking all kinds of drink that maybe I should not have. I started paying for things that I maybe should not have. I started praying to shrines because I thought that was the right thing to do, reclaiming my roots, dressing in African apparel as we're supposed to do, bowing to African gods, believing in African gods. Completely abandoning who I knew myself to be, because in America, they tell us that we are no people, that we don't know ourselves. We're just these slaves that, we don't know nothing, and we have to come back to Africa to find ourselves. Some of you don't know this, but I was actually robbed during broad daylight, thrown out in the street after someone came crashing into my room. See, that predicament actually began by a very naive American who sent me there. That whole occurrence that everyone saw publicly, this is the thing, I'm not placing the blame. It's just that I would never send myself to harm. It's just that sometimes we as Americans, we lead ourselves into places that we don't know because we've never been there. We never experienced it. So yeah, I was one of those who was robbed during daylight. I can laugh now because I got through it. This American that led me there had never been there, is a leader for many that are going to those same shrines that I was going to. This American that led me to where I went and found my demise also led so many other Americans here to Ghana, to the shrines, to pray, to get divinations, to correct their illnesses, to be healed of this and that, to find money, to bring their families together, all this and that. All of it is temporary. All of it is a scam. I was living with devils. People that don't have God. And I was one of them because I believed things outside of myself. I thought I was supposed to come reclaim the heritage. You know, like, guys, I'm just getting started. I'm not even there yet. I'm just getting started. Total abandonment of self, total abandonment of everything I knew myself to be for shrines, for a spiritual system that's not even helping the African people. So if you ever wonder, like, why is there underdevelopment in some areas? Why is the thinking like this? Why is that? Africa needs to get it together. Africa, they need to get united. If you want to know why it hasn't happened yet, I am sharing with you why it has not happened yet.
This was definitely a deeply personal journey that my sister here went through. Coming to Africa, bearing that yearning to reconnect with motherland, but also to reconnect with your ancestors. And the begging question is, these many years later, hundreds of years later, is that a possibility? That time, before Christianity or any other religion came to Africa, Africans had their own life. They had their own set systems, how they operated in their spaces, and how they connected with the spiritual world. Because the spiritual world, and especially the ancestors, were seen as intercessors, people who connected the living to the past. But the time seems to have gone by, because remember, the so-called orderly religion was brought to Africa, gun in one hand, plain truth, Bible in the other hand. And ultimately, at the end of it, the argument was that African spirituality, what Africans worship and how they go about worshiping, was then deemed as evil or devilish. There is a famous African writer, Nigerian, Chinua Achebe, and his amazing book, Things Fall Apart, actually captures the whole experience that my sister is talking about here. That the African person had a way of life that held them together as a people. Hence, the arrival of the European to the continent brought about a major disruption. And that was basically about the spiritual world, African ceremonies. It went all the way to the kind of foods that Africans used. And for example, traditional brews. In Africa today, governments consider local brews as illegal. And this borrowed largely from the antics of the foreign powers when they were on the continent, that anything and everything that was African was virtually rubbished. The white man arrived, things fell apart. And that is what Chinua Achebe in his very powerful book was alluding to, that Africa lost its value, lost its culture because of the arrival of the foreign powers, the religion that they brought with them, and they went about essentially dismantling all the structures that existed in terms of society, family, and what we now call chiefdoms. We never had chiefs. We had kingdoms. We had kingdoms that had their kings, that had wafalme, which is Swahili for king, mfalme. So mfalmes existed in many African kingdoms. Whether you're talking about South Africa, you're talking about Zimbabwe, the West African region, the Dahomey, and all these places. And with that also existed their traditional worship of their ancestors, their tradition of worship such as voodoo, which you would find in places like Ghana, Benin, Togo, that region. So DNY here, obviously in coming to Africa and experiencing that and hoping that that was something that would help her find herself, unfortunately got scammed. She talks about it very openly and was eventually violently evicted from a place that she considered home, before finally meeting this brother who they now have a life together, and a beautiful life in their Ghanaian rural place, growing together, building something together that really is worth emulating. So these are realities that, again, exist on the continent of Africa. as to whether they have a place in this day and age is debatable. There are things I think we can celebrate as our past. They may not really be the kind of things we need to do in this day and age. My sister here has indicated that she saw the light. And half the time we also go through these experiences, and really there's a light within us. There's a guiding compass based on how we were raised, how we were socialized, that oftentimes when we depart from, we tend to go astray and could really go down a difficult path. And the beauty of sharing this very personal journey for Africans of diaspora, for Africans on the continent, is that it's a trigger, alerting us to some of the follies of our society, of our government today, about how we manage our affairs as a people, as a nation state, and as African people. Right off the back of African spirituality, what you are now facing is the advent of mega churches across Africa. And with that seems to be a major scheme to really manipulate the ordinary populace, to give almost to their blood. So there's a gospel of prosperity that seems to have held the world hostage. And Africa has become a major harvesting ground for this kind of gospel. And unfortunately, in Africa, church and politics seem to be engaging in this dance that is keeping Africa shackled, blinding the masses, stopping them from realizing their own potential. And now there's the narrative that a prayer apparently can fix poor decisions that are made, either economic or in terms of choice of leadership. Seemingly, Africa is being told, listen, let's pray about it and it's all going to go away. It doesn't work like that. Young men and women are dying in the high seas, trying to reach Europe, trying to reach Italy, trying to reach Spain and all these places. Traveling through the desert, Libya, a broken place, again broken through the influence of foreign powers, on a mission entirely to break governments or individuals they perceive as threats to their Western influence and to their Western domination of the world. People have said that Africa clearly may never be able to advance itself, to develop itself, and really get to use the full potential of motherland, potential from within the belly of Mother Earth. The minerals that we've got, vast minerals, whether they're talking about Congo DRC, whether they're talking about Zimbabwe, whether they're talking about Nigeria, from oil to diamonds to cobalt, now driving the car industry. But for the 54 or 55 different reasons, which is the nation state, Africa is unable to exploit its potential and get itself to the table where they can be at par and respected by other nations. This is a tragedy of Africa, that spirituality that my sisters very powerfully pointed out. And now other religions joining hands have become such a potent force combined with the politics that is holding Africa hostage. Some two West African YouTubers, big in Africa obviously, Tayo Aina and Wodemaya, attended one of the voodoo festivals, I believe in Benin.
Now, what if I told you that spinning masquerade you see there has nothing inside it? You would think I was crazy, right? Have a look again. How can this be possible? How can a masquerade be dancing all by itself?
Somebody's in there shaking 1, 2, 3, and they tell it no one was in there. You know, this is the beauty of voodoo to me. I mean, I don't know, people might say it's a trick.
Please share in the comments. Let us hear whether these things are real, whether we should actually exercise caution. So we've got to confront these truths that seem to shackle us all these years after the colonial powers essentially interfered with and destroyed what was a fabric that worked for us. in that time. So much said, so much more can be said. This is Africa, our business. It's your business, it's my business. This is home. So if you haven't subscribed and this is something you can relate to, please do subscribe, ring that bell, share as much as you can, because your support goes a long way in giving us the sustenance to make this content. I want to say a big thank you, and we'll see you in the next video. This is LB. I'm out.